I built $1 billion empire just to see my mother smile. I spent my life making sure her hand never have to work again. When I came home early from a merger, the silence in my mansion was broken by a sound that shattered. I stood in the doorway and watched my wife pour a bucket of filthy black mop water over my mother's head, knelt on the marble floor, rubbing a tiny stain with a "Missed a spot, you old peasant," my wife screamed, her voice dripping with arrogance as my mother sobbed, "Please, my back, it hurts." My wife leaned down and hissed, "If you tell my husband, I'll put you in a cage and let you rot." She didn't see me standing there. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. But in that moment, I decided that my wife would never leave this house. I'm not giving her a divorce. That's too easy. I'm going to make her live the very nightmare she just forced upon the woman who gave me life. Success, for me, was never about the fame. It was about redemption. My mother, Sarah, had spent 20 years cleaning the toilets of the wealthy to put me through school. I still remember the smell of bleach on her skin, the way her fingers would bleed from the harsh chemicals. So, when Sterling Global became a $1 billion reality, the first thing I did was build a sanctuary. $30 million estate in the hills, a monument to the woman who sacrificed her youth for my future. I thought I had found a partner who would respect the sanctity of this home. Alina came from a background of high society. When we married, she presented herself as someone who but I made one critical mistake. I spent too much time in the boardroom. I was so busy protecting our future that I failed to see the cold, calculating heart of the person I had brought into our lives. Elena didn't see my mother as the heart of the home. She saw her as an embarrassing relic of a working-class past that carried herself with an air of immense superiority, looking down on anyone she deemed beneath her social standing. To the world, she was the dignified wife of a tycoon, but within these walls, she was a person consumed by her own self-importance. My mother, ever the protector, never said a word. She didn't want to disturb my work or be the reason for conflict in my house. She bore the sharp insults and the psychological cruelty in silence, retreating into the shadows of the very mansion I had built for her comfort. I stayed quiet, thinking her silence would keep But today, the merger in Chicago ended 4 hours early. I didn't call. I didn't text. I walked through the side entrance, my footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. As I approached the grand kitchen, I heard a sound that didn't belong in a home filled with love. The sound of a heavy bucket hitting the floor, and a voice filled with pure, unadulterated malice. The sight that met my eyes froze the blood in my veins. My mother, a woman who should have been resting, was on her knees. Her frail body was shaking from the cold. Elena was standing over her with a look of terrifying triumph, holding a bucket of dirty water she had just emptied. Humiliation was total. The betrayal was absolute. As Elena threatened to lock her away I realized that my wife had no... She thought her status, as he was about to find out that she was minute, whose lease on my mercy had just permanently. I stood in the shadow of the arched kitchen, my body as still as the marble statues. My heart was a furnace of white-hot rage, but my mind had turned into a block of ice. I didn't rush in. I didn't scream. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, pressing the record button. I needed every second of this cruelty captured. I wanted a record of the moment Elena destroyed her own soul. "What's the matter? Did the water stun you?" Elena's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet sobbing. She stood there with her arms crossed, looking down at my mother with a cold, terrifying sense. I nudged my mother's trembling hand with the toe of her designer shoe. "This floor costs more than the shack you were raised in. Scrub it properly, or you'll be sleeping in the garden tonight." My mother, a woman who had never known anything but hard work and sacrifice, bowed her head even lower. She picked up the toothbrush and began to scrub the grout, her tears mixing with the dirty gray water pooled around her. She was 65 years old. Her joints were stiff, her back was bowed from years of labor, and here she was, being treated like a stray animal in the house her built for her. Lena let out a short, mocking laugh. "You think Elias will protect you? He's too busy being a king. He doesn't have time for a peasant mother who can't even keep a kitchen clean. Remember, if you mention a word of this to him, I'll make sure you're sent to a state facility so far away he'll never find you. With a final disgusted huff, Elena turned and walked out of the kitchen through the opposite, her heels clicking rhythmically against the floor. She was so consumed by her own power, she never even glanced toward the shadow. The moment she was gone, I stepped into the light. My mother gasped, her eyes widening in sheer terror. Elena had returned to realized it was me. Her first instinct wasn't to complain or seek comfort, it was to hide. She frantically tried to wipe the dirty water from her face with her soaked sleeves. Elias, you're home early, she stammered, voice a fragile, broken whisper. I was helping the maids. I'm so clumsy, I spilled the bucket. Elena was just teaching me how. Good girl, Elias. Don't be mad at her. Even now, soaked to the bone and humiliated, she was trying to protect my peace. She was willing to endure hell to keep my home from falling. I knelt down in the dirty water next to her, ignoring the ruin of my custom-tailored. I took the toothbrush from her hand and threw it across the room. Stop, I said, my voice low and thick with suppressed emotion. You don't have to lie anymore. I saw it. I saw everything. I pulled her into a hug, cold gray water soaking into my shirt, sobbing into my shoulder with the weight of months of hidden pain. I'm sorry, she wept. I didn't want to ruin your happiness. My happiness died the moment she whispered into her hair. Go to your room. I've already alerted the staff. They are waiting for you. You will never see that bucket again. I helped her up and handed her over to the head housekeeper, whose eyes were filled with tears of shame for not speaking up. Once my mother was safely away, I stood in the center of the kitchen, looking at the mess Elena had pulled out my phone and sent a single message to my security lockdown initiated. Block all vehicle exits. No one leaves. No exceptions. The hunt was over. The trial was about to begin. I walked up the grand staircase, each footstep echoing like a gavel in a silent courtroom. I didn't head to my bedroom to change out of my soaked, ruined suit. I went straight to the master suite. Elena was there, lounging on a chaise longue, scrolling through her phone, probably checking the social media engagement on her latest charity post. I didn't even look up when I entered. You're home early, she said, her voice light and casual, completely devoid of the venom I had heard minutes ago. I wasn't expecting you until tonight. I hope the merger went well. I stood at the foot of the bed, dripping gray, dirty water onto the pristine. The contrast was poetic. The filth she had forced upon my mother was now staining the luxuries she so desperately craved. The merger went perfectly, I said, my voice dangerously calm. But something happened in the kitchen just spill. Elena finally looked up, her eyes narrowing as she saw my state. I took in my wet clothes and the dark look in my eyes. For a split second, a flicker of panic crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with her pride. Oh, that, she said, waving a hand dismissively. Your mother is getting so clumsy in her knocked over a bucket of cleaning supplies. I was trying to help her clean it up, but she's so stubborn. I told her to go rest. Is that right? I pulled out my phone and turned this toward her. I pressed play. The room was filled with the sound of her own to spot. You old. The video showed her pouring the water. It showed her kicking my mother's hand. It showed the raw, naked cruelty that she thought was hidden in closed doors. Her face went white. She scrambled to her feet, the phone slipping from her hand onto the. That's not what it looks like. Difficult. She was disrespecting the house. The house stepped closer, my presence filling the room. You think this house belongs to you? You think this life belongs to you? Every stone of this mansion was laid to honor the woman you treated like trash. You are a guest here, Elena. A guest who has overstayed her welcome. It was a mistake. I was stride, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her touch, as if it were. I've spent the last 20 minutes in my study, I said. I didn't just watch today's video. I watched the last 3 months. I saw you make her eat leftovers from the trash. I saw you take away her heater in the winter. I saw every humiliation you thought went unnoticed. Elena's desperation turned into a sharp, ugly defense. So what? Are you going to divorce me? Go ahead. I'll take half of everything. I'll take this house, and I'll make sure your precious mother ends up in the cheapest nursing home. I'm your wife, Elias. You can't just throw me out. I leaned in, my face inches from. I didn't look like a husband anymore. I looked like the man who had crushed every competitor in his path to the top. You're right about one thing, Elena. I'm not going to divorce you, I said, a slow, cold smile spreading. Divorce is an escape. Divorce means you go on with your life, spending my money and finding your next victim. No, you're going to stay my wife. But the life you knew is over. I pulled a tablet from the side table. I have already frozen every account in your name. Your credit cards have been canceled. Your car has been remotely locked. And as of 60 seconds ago, you no longer have access to any room in this house except for the small maid's quarters in the basement. You can't do this. She shrieked. I can, and I have. Wanted to treat my mother like a servant in her own home? Now, you're going to find out exactly what it feels like to live in the world you create. My security team is at the door. They have orders to escort you to your new room. You aren't leaving this estate, Elena. You're going to stay here, under my roof, under my rules, until you've felt every ounce of the shame you inflict. This is illegal. This is kidnapping. No, I said, walking toward the door. This is a marriage. And in this marriage, I hold all the power. Signed a very specific prenuptial agreement regarding moral turpitude and elder abuse. If you try to leave, I'll hand that video to the police. You'll trade this mansion for a concrete. But if you stay, maybe in a few years, you'll learn what it means to be human. I walked out, closing the heavy oak door behind me, the sound of her screaming my name fading as the security team moved in. Lockdown had truly begun. The transition was instantaneous. Within an hour, the Grand Master Suite was stripped of Elena's presence. She was moved to a stark, windowless room in the lower wing, a room once reserved for temporary staff. It was clean, but it was humble, lacking silk rugs that she viewed as her birthright. The first rule of her new life was simply no digital connection. Confiscated her tablets, her laptops, and her hidden burners. For someone whose entire ego was built on the validation of strangers on social media, the silence was a physical blow, socially erased. I directed my PR team to issue a brief statement that Alina was taking a prolonged sabbatical for personal reflection, effectively cutting her off from the high society to impress. You can't keep me here, she screamed through the heavy door on the first night. This is a violation of my rights. I opened the door and stood in the hallway, flanked by two of my most loyal security officers. You had a choice, Elena. You chose the luxury of this house over the freedom of a jail cell. If you wish to leave, the gate is open, but the police are waiting just outside with the footage of what you did to my mother. You decide, the basement or the prison. She went quiet, the reality of the trap finally sinking in. Knew that in a courtroom she would be ruined. Her family name would be dragged through the mud. Chances of a comfortable life. She was a bird in a gilded cage of her own. Second rule was the mirror of labor. I didn't want her to be a servant for the sake of cruelty. I wanted her to understand the weight of the work she had mocked. I dismissed the third-party cleaning crew. From now on, Elena was responsible for maintenance of the lower hallway. I won't do it, she spat, throwing a cleaning rag at my feet. Then you won't eat, I replied. My mother worked for every meal she ever gave me. You have spent your life consuming the labor of others. That ends today. I left her there, hungry, and by the third day, the hunger and the isolation broke. I watched on the monitors as she picked, trembling with indignation, began to wipe the dust from the baseboards. She was learning the first lesson of the Sterling Empire. Nothing is given. Everything is earned. Meanwhile, the upper floors of the mansion underwent a transformation. I moved my mother into the master suite, filled the room with her favorite jasmine flowers, placed the cold marble with warm wooden floors and carpets. I hired a specialized medical team to help her recover from the physical strain Elena had put. Every evening, I spent hours with my mother. We talked about her youth, about the struggles we had overcome, and I watched the light slowly return to her eyes. She was no longer a shadow in the house. She was the queen. Elias, she said, looking toward the hallway. Where is she? I haven't seen her in days. She's learning a very important lesson, Ami, I told her, kissing her hand. She's learning that the hands that build a home are more precious than the ones that just decorate it. Don't worry about her. For the first time in years, she is where she belonged. Elena's life was now a cycle of she had no one to perform for, no one to bully. She was forced to live with her own thoughts. For a woman of her character, that was the harshest punishment. She was no longer Elena Sterling, the socialite. She was a woman in a room, realizing that the power she thought nothing more than a shadow that I had now retracted. The months passed, and the hierarchy of the Sterling mansion had been completely inverted. The atmosphere of the house had shifted from one of cold, superficial perfection to a place of genuine warmth and healing. My mother had regained her strength. Her laughter once again echoed through the halls she had once been. She spent her days in the gardens, tending to roses, or in the library, catching up on the years of peace she had been denied. Far below the grand library, in the gate, Elena lived a life of force. The woman who once spent thousands on a single dress now wore the simple, plain cotton garment. Her world had shrunk to the four walls of her room and the corridors she was tasked with. No audience to clap for her, no cameras to capture her grace, no servants to bark orders at. I made it a point to never speak to her with anger. Anger is a form of passion. No longer deserved even that from me. Instead, I treated her with a cold, professional detachment. I was no longer her husband. I was her warden. One afternoon, I brought my mother to the terrace for tea. I purposely chose a time when I knew Elena would be cleaning the glass partitions near. As we sat, served by the finest staff, Elena stood just a few feet away, a spray bottle in one hand and a cloth in the other. She looked at my mother, the woman she had once called a peasant, now draped in fine silk, beaded with the utmost reverence. Elena's eyes met mine through the glass. They weren't filled with the fire of rebellion anymore. They were hollow, shadowed by the psychological weight of her isolation. We looked at the tea, the cakes, and the way I leaned in to listen to my mother's every word. She saw the love she had tried to flourishing in her absence. Elias, my mother whispered, noticing the woman behind the glass. She looks tired. Perhaps she should sit with us? My mother's heart was still too pure for this world. Even after everything, she couldn't stand to see another soul. She is fine, Ami. Loud enough for Elena to hear. She is finally learning the value of a day's work. She is learning that respect is not a birthright. It is something you earn through the way you treat those who have nothing. Elena flinched as if I had struck her, rubbing frantically, reflection showing a woman she barely recognized. The queen had been reduced to a ghost in her own palace. Psychological pressure was deliberate. I didn't want to break her mind. I wanted to break her ego. Every day, she had to witness the life she could have had only chosen kindness. Saw the wealth she was legally tied but could no longer touch. She was technically a billionaire's wife, yet she had to ask permission to walk in the garden. One evening, I found her sitting on the floor of her small room, staring at a framed photo of our wedding day that she had somehow managed to keep. She didn't look at me when I entered. "I hate you," she whispered, voice devoid of its former sharp edge. It was just a dull statement of fact. Hate is a luxury, Elena, standing in the doorway. You hated my mother because she reminded you of I am simply holding up a mirror so you can see you are still my wife. You are still a Sterling. But from now on, that name is your burden, not your shield. I turned off the light and closed the door. As I walked away, I didn't feel the thrill of revenge. I felt the somber peace of justice. The woman who tried to put my mother in a cage was now living in a prison of her own character. The bars were made of the very truth she had tried to hide. 1 year had passed since the night. The world outside still knew me as the titan of industry, and they still saw Elena as the elusive wife of a billionaire, dedicated to her private study. The lie I had crafted for the public was the only thing that kept her social reputation alive. But inside these walls, the truth was the only currency that mattered. I sat in the library, looking out over the sprawling estate. My mother was in the garden below, playing with a group of children from the local orphanage we now sponsored. She looked younger, her laughter carried by the breeze. She had found the peace I had worked my entire life to provide. A soft knock came at the door. It wasn't the confident, sharp knock of the woman I had married. It was hesitant. "Come in," I said. Elena entered. She didn't head for the expensive chairs or the bar. She stood near the door, her hands folded in the arrogance that once defined her every movement, been replaced by a quiet, somber, cold, and judgmental, now held the weight of 1,000 hours of lower hallways finished. The library dust has been cleared. I looked at her. I didn't see the monster from the kitchen anymore, but I didn't see a victim either. I saw someone who had finally been forced to confront the ugliness of her own soul. "Sit down, Alina," I said, gesturing to the chair across. She sat tentatively, as if she no longer felt she belonged in the library. "You've spent a year in silence," I began. "You've worked the same floors my mother once worked. You've lived without the noise of the world telling you how important you are. Tell me, what have you learned?" Elena looked down at her hands that were no longer perfectly manicured, but showed the signs of honest labor. "I learned that power is a lie," she whispered. "I thought I was better than her, because I had the name and the money. But in that room, without my phone, without my friends, I realized I was nothing. I was just a woman who had forgotten how to be kind." She looked up at me, a single tear tracking down her cheek. "I don't ask for your love, Elias. I don't even ask for your trust. I just wanted you to know that I understand. You didn't do it to hurt me. You did it to stop me from becoming someone I'll never come back from." I stayed silent for a long moment. This was the no-escape resolution. If I had divorced her, she would have left with millions, bitter and unrepentant, likely to repeat her cruelty elsewhere. By keeping her here, by forcing her to live inside the consequences, I had performed a different kind of surgery. "The lockdown is over, Elena," I said. She froze, her breath hitching. You're letting me leave?" "The gates are open," I replied. "You are free to walk out that door. You can take a settlement and try to rebuild your life. Or you can stay. But not as the queen of the Sterling estate. Stay as a student of the woman you once mocked. You will work alongside our foundation. You will help the people you once looked down. You will live a life of service, not status." Elena looked out the window at my mother. I saw the genuine joy on Sarah's face. Then she looked back at me. She knew that leaving meant returning to a shallow world that would eventually staying meant a long... "I'll stay," she said, her voice stronger than I had heard it in years. "I want to learn how to be the person. Then let the work begin." As she left the room, I knew the balance had finally been restored. Was safe. Even the woman who had tried to destroy it all was beginning to find her way back to... Punishment is not escape. It is living with the truth. For the Sterlings, the truth had finally set us all